the South African Revenue Service, SARS, will reveal what it collected in terms of gross tax revenues in the 2024-25 financial year. At the recently tabled 2025 national budget, Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana announced that SARS expected to collect 1.85 trillion rand for the year ended February 2025. This was 16.7 billion rand less than what it forecast in the 2024 budget. With all the major taxes, personal income tax, VAT and corporate income tax expected to be lower. But this afternoon, we'll get the real numbers in terms of the tax take from SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter.
I want to double dose. Very special to have my mother here today, accompanied by my sister Naomi. My mother will be 86 in October, and she's also an active taxpayer who was auto-assessed for the last 3 years. All stakeholders present, media representatives, thank you for covering our event. Fellow South Africans listening on the public platforms, welcome to the SARS 2024-25 revenue announcement, those physically in the room and those connected online. I sometimes wish we had a room large enough at events such as this. I want to start by just reminding all of you that SARS is a story of hope. We are clear that we exist to serve the people of South Africa. And we are inspired by the impact that we know we have on the lives of citizens. Today, we want to express appreciation and recognize amongst them those who are still active, and we chose, as I said, some of the oldest, and I want to just share with you some of their names. I've mentioned my mother is here, but we also have this morning met with Ms. Emerentia Lecourt de Bilot, the 107-year-old taxpayer, Ms. Aletta Martenia Kettle, the 102-year-old taxpayer, Christina Levisa Trute, 101. I told her this morning in cricket terms she would be 101 not out. Mr. Henry Cronier, who I told you is a pioneer in customs and excise and still active. Mr. Petrus Johannes Delaporte, 92. Then Miss Ivy Maureen Msweli. I met Miss Msweli on a visit in the Durban branch, and she was in the queue, and I asked her, "What are you doing here, Gogo?" And she says, "I am just in very prim and proper. I am just here to ensure that all my affairs are in order." And so, what a wonderful moment for me to meet her. And we have awarded these exemplary taxpayers with a SARS Taxpayer Appreciation Award, something they can hold dear, but also to give them a clear message that we value the contribution and commitment that they have and continue to make. And again, to them, halala, thank you. We salute you. Returning to our core business, SARS has the mandate to collect all taxes that are due to the state, to ensure optimal compliance with tax and customs laws, and to facilitate legitimate trade through our customs service. But whilst we administer laws, our higher purpose is about enabling government to build a capable state that fosters economic growth and social development, serving the well-being of all South Africans. Without the important institution of SARS, our democracy would be unfunded. SARS is a national treasure that belongs to all of us and should never be taken for granted. Since the dawn of our democracy, the Revenue and Customs Administration has contributed over 24.5 billion rand at a compound annual growth rate over the 3 decades of 9.8%. And during this time, our tax base has grown from 2.7 million to 33 million taxpayers, or a CAGR, compound growth rate, of 8.3%. The focus on SARS in the past 6 weeks has been that of great scrutiny and resounding support. This has reminded us of the significant role of SARS, but also the degree of dependency of many millions of South Africans who benefit from our work. The hopes, the fears, and the anxieties of South Africans would remain unattended, and the material conditions of the most vulnerable would be even more dire than what we have today. Everything we do is about the transformational impact we have on the lives of people. This is our higher purpose. We honor this privileged work and are committed to continue working hard in the name of every South African. Indeed, the establishment of an autonomous, independent agency and the subsequent success of SARS is one of the proud achievements of our young democracy. I would now like to turn to probably the only reason you came here today, which is the outcome of the financial year 2024-2025. In February 2024, the Minister announced a printed estimate for net revenue of 1.863 trillion. Mainly due to a decline in economic assumptions, the Finance Minister revised this estimate to 1.841 in the medium-term announcement in October. And in his recent budget announcement on the 12th of March 2025, this estimate was revised upwards to 1.846 due to the improved revenue collections. The final result we will announce today was delivered under tough and continuing challenging circumstances. GDP at 4.9, wages increased lower than was estimated a year ago, fuel consumption was lower, a good message because of the improvement in production of electricity, but a bad message if you're a tax collector because our levies went down. Imports declined from what was initially assumed to be 6% growth, actually declined by 1.3%. And the supply chain security remains at risk due to geopolitical tensions. The impact locally of our own logistics constraints continues to hamper growth in the economy. And globally, tax and financial crime, as well as debt recovery, is a concern shared by my peers around the world. Deployment of digital technologies and AI and evolving business models provides or presents both an opportunity as well as a risk. It is true that whilst we can reimagine our operating models, so too can criminals. And we contend with that as we try to do our work. Notwithstanding these conditions, we have delivered a very pleasing revenue result. I am therefore pleased to announce that SARS has delivered on the challenge set by the Minister during his budget announcement. The challenge he set was 1.846 trillion. In fact, as at midnight last night, on the 31st of March 2025, our preliminary net revenue results totaled 1.8551 billion. Thank you. Representing a year-on-year growth of 6.6% in a projected GDP of around 4.9%. In summary, therefore, the revised estimate, against the revised estimate, gross collections was 2.303%, which is 6.9% higher than prior year and 8.8 billion above the revised estimate. Refunds of 447.8 billion is 8.2% higher than the prior year and 3 billion above the revised estimate. a net revenue of 1.885.1 trillion is 6.6% higher than prior year and 8.8 billion above the revised estimate. So in summary, net revenue of 1.8551 trillion is a growth of 114 billion higher, a growth of 6.6% against the prior year, and exceeds the revised estimate by 8.8 billion rand, which is, we believe, in the current environment, a very credible outcome delivered by SARS. Before I share the details of the year's results, I would like to focus on the project of rebuilding SARS, because these results do not come about by themselves. They come about because of the work, the hard work, the focus, the diligence of 13,000 men and women whom we are privileged to lead. And I would like to tell you a little bit about that. The essence of the recommendations from the Commission of Inquiry into Tax Administration directed us to focus and restore leadership, governance, and integrity, and the rebuilding of institutional capability in order that the performance be reinstated. This was an intentional and deliberate program against which I would like to now report. It is the strategic plan tabled 5 years ago. In this plan, we tabled an aspirational vision to become a smart, modern SARS with unquestionable integrity, trusted and admired, along with a clear strategic intent to build an administrative system based on voluntary compliance. This strategic intent finds expression in 9 strategic objectives, which has guided consistently the rebuilding of the institution. To track progress on the organizational integrity of SARS, we have instituted clear measures which are regularly measured and surveyed, because we believe that we measure everything. Only that which gets measured gets done. We cannot live in a false sense of hubris that we are achieving what we set out to do unless we measure it. And so I'd like to share with you some of these trends that reflects the positive and encouraging outcome. We call these perspectives on our organizational integrity. Firstly, in taxpayer service, we have seen an increase from 2019 of 54.88% to the recent measurement against objective criteria tabled in Parliament in our service charter of 87.13%. We measure taxpayers' attitude towards compliance. In 2018-19, when we first measured it, it was 66%. In our recent measurement, we have gone up by 11 percentage points to 77%. The next one is a very important one for us, because public trust is sacrosanct for the work we do. Our behavior must be irreproachable. Our integrity must be beyond question, so that people who do not like to part with money do so whilst knowing that they have been treated professionally and fairly, and that their contribution is towards a cause that is worthy. And so when we can tell you that in 2018-19 public trust in SARS was at a low of 48%, it is with immense pride that we can share with you in our recent assessment, public trust has gone up to just under 75%. Incredible vote of confidence by the public. We measure voluntary compliance because that is our strategic intent. And in 2019, voluntary compliance index was 62.85%, and again has increased to 66.29% when we measured it earlier this year. And then the Auditor General is here, so we are very pleased to say that in 2022 through to the 2019 through to the current year, SARS has very proudly not only achieved an unqualified report, but in the last 3 years a clean audit report, which again is a testament that in order to deliver these exceptional results, we do not have to do so in an environment of poor governance. And then very close to my heart is our people, because without the people, we are nothing. And so we focused very, very diligently on creating a more conducive environment for our staff during this period. And we introduced the notion of employee engagement with a very deliberate and intentional program to drive that. And again, we are very pleased to say that when we measured it in 1920, it was at 61.6%. And we have just received the report of the latest survey we've done in the first calendar quarter of this year, and our employee engagement had gone up to 71%. Again, so why are these indicators important? They don't speak about money, but it speaks about building an institution that can give confidence about the sustainability of giving effect to the mandate and the confidence with which we can project the revenue that is incumbent on the work that we do. And so these are what we call lead indicators at the heart of the rebuilding of SARS that gives us confidence in the sustainability of South Africa's fiscal integrity. Because tax revenue remain the lowest cost of funding government's program. It's cheaper than borrowing money, it is less impactful than raising taxes, and ultimately it is about spreading the tax base equitably across all those who have a paying obligation. Let me now return to some of the detailed results. And you will see there that in terms of each of these tax items, have a quick glance across it, but in the tax product analysis, we see that we have had a 12.56% growth, 12.6% growth in personal income tax. In corporate, we have had a growth of just over 2%. In VAT, a growth of 2.3%. Import duties, 8.6%. Taxes on property, a growth of almost 16%. Dividends tax and STC, a growth of 9.5%. Specific excise of 11.5%. Net fuel of 6.27%, and other taxes growing at 4%, a grand total of just under 6.6% growth year on year in net revenue. The slides that follow just gives a little bit more detail about that. So personal income tax, we can see this year, contributed 733 billion rand against 650 billion rand the year before. Pleasing to say that our refunds in each of these categories have also increased. I want to pause for a moment and talk about two-pot retirement withdrawals, because this has been topical. Here, I can share that in record time, we are to build an administrative capacity to provide directives, unprecedented volumes of directives, and to provide it in near real time so that all of the pension funds who applied for these directives could give effect to the will of those who withdrew. And so of the 2.8 million taxpayers who in the last financial year submitted an application for directive, we were able to issue directives to just over 2.5 million, which is related to almost 2.7 million taxpayers and allowing an amount of 47.7 billion rand to flow back into the economy had a good multiplier effect. We saw a little bit of an uptick of that in consumption, along with the governor's helpful hand to lower interest rates, and generally inflation trending down, and the net tax collected from this initiative being 11.87 billion rand. What is really pleasing here, if you look at the spread across the various tax margins, you'll see that about 645, or a quarter of those who applied for the directive, did not pay tax because of the threshold where they find themselves. So a lot of the concerns about taxing poor people has no basis, because those who are below that threshold receive their money in full. And then in the middle three segments, where we have those who earn a little bit more, that's where the bulk of the contribution of the almost 12 billion came. Also interesting to note is that generally it is the middle class families who have dipped their hand into the retirement cookie jar, and wealthy people, clearly to the small extent that they did, we think that that is how they manage the diversity of their portfolio. So that is really a story behind the two-pot retirement withdrawals. I think overall the balance between retention and withdrawal, 2/3 and 1/3 respectively, was a fine, or what I call a Goldilocks solution to a problem of attending to short-term financial needs, which is dire for many families, whilst retaining a portion of that for retirement, which is very important for keeping the pressure off the state for further social grants. On corporate income tax, there you see the growth of 323 billion against 316.9 billion previous year. I will come back and touch on some of the compliance trends we see there in a moment. And value-added tax, which is the next tax, 458 billion against a prior year of 447 billion. So that's VAT. I want to then move on to customs duties and fuel levy. There we see an increase to 7.6 billion from 70.5 billion last year. And fuel levy, we see there a decrease from 91.5 to 85.8, reflecting a lower consumption due to an improved electricity production, but also a shift from using diesel as an alternative fuel for electricity towards rooftop solar. So positive for the economy, not so good for tax collection. And so what we thought we would also share with you is just a view of tax revenue by province, along with the growth. And these are the constitutional provinces, the 9 provinces in South Africa. And there we see Gauteng growing the net revenue contribution by 5.48%, KwaZulu-Natal by 6%, the Western Cape by 9.7%, the Eastern Cape almost 7%, 6.9%, Mpumalanga 10.25%, Limpopo 17.24%, Northwest 10.14%, Free State 10.06%, Northern Cape 0.38%, bringing again the total of 6.6. We thought it's important just to see where the economic activity sits. And of course, you also have to look at the actual contributions rather than just the growth. And there you see that most of the economic activity is in Gauteng, and we have ranked that for you in order of the size of contribution. Another lens through which we look, and this is for the interest of our directors here, because they would like to see how well did they do. And here we have given a view for our own employees. So the large business and international grew by 5.8%, Gauteng North region by 9%, KwaZulu-Natal by 5%, Western Cape by just over 9%, Gauteng South by 3.3%, Eastern Cape by just over 9%, Limpopo by about 17.5%, Northwest by 9.39%, and Free State by 11.24%. And then we have high wealth individuals by 15.4%. Head office, that's because we also collect taxes. We make the occasional phone calls, and we grew 17.06%. We really worked hard. And then that must still be in our final reconciliation, be allocated, is the amount at the bottom. And here again, you can see the largest contribution coming from our large business and international segment, followed by Gauteng North, as one would expect, down to the Northern Cape as one of our smaller regions. So that gives you a sense of how the regions performed. And let's, at this stage, applause and give recognition for the hard work under the leadership of the directors. I know they're all smiling because they know that they have achieved what we set out to do as a team. You hear us speak a lot about our compliance program. And so I want to spend a few minutes, if you will allow me, to talk about compliance revenue. Central to the work we do is our compliance program. This is the program of work we formulate at the beginning of the year and set out to execute or implement as we give effect to our mandate objectives. The result of this work produces additional revenue which otherwise would not have been in the fiscus because it has not been paid over voluntarily by taxpayers to SARS. We therefore refer to this as the compliance dividend, or the revenue from administrative efficiencies. This year, I am pleased to announce a total of just over 300 billion rand from our compliance program. It represents a year-on-year growth of around 17% and is made up of the following specific areas. And this is, I am often reminded, 32 million little things we do to produce 300 billion rand. I see the DDG of Treasury is there. I don't think I welcomed him earlier, and I don't know when he snuck in. But welcome to our Treasury colleagues. 94 billion rand is included in this amount by resolving over 3.7 million instances of outstanding debt. This is debt that would not have been collected had we not made the call, send a SMS, send a friendly letter, change the color of the letter from black to red, and eventually send the sheriff and issue a court, a civil judgment. And that's before we have to resort to freezing bank accounts and assets and attaching assets. So this is the suite of work we do. 307 million instances producing 94 billion rand. Included in this is the debt project that we embarked on in the past year. 103 billion from tax verifications, where risks are flagged through our AI-driven risk profiling models, powered by big data. We then look at the alert, we do debt equalization, and these are the refunds that we then further investigate, our staff further investigate. And this suite of work amounted to 1.7 million verification cases, producing the 103 billion rand. 59 billion from syndicated crime. These are complex crimes where more than one taxpayer is involved, often cross-border. That they executed 320,000 compliance audits. 30 billion from, the 59 was from customs and compliance audits, and the 30 billion from syndicated crime, conducting 198 complex investigations. 14 billion from general compliance work, doing 200,000 follow-ups with individual taxpayers who have outstanding issues on the account that needs to be completed, and invariably when a taxpayer account is untidy, it's because they owe us money. 26 million service-related interactions at our branches, either via a phone, via a self-service platform. We assist taxpayers and traders to comply. And so this, amounting to the 301 billion to the fiscus in this current year, a growth, of 15.8%, or 16.25% of our total net revenue. Slightly higher this year than in previous years because of our added focus on the debt recovery project. I would like to share some of the phenomena and themes that we encounter in non-compliance. Firstly, let me deal with customs. On the 1st of September, we introduced VAT on small parcel e-commerce imports because the high street retailers experienced an inequitable situation that they were paying the duties in full, whereas clearing agents who brought in small parcels for thousands of individuals did not have to pay VAT, and neither did they have to pay the exact duty because there was a de minimis of 20% on goods below 500. We focused firstly on the clothing, textile and footwear in September, and from the 1st of February expanded that across the other range, and these goods therefore collectively resulted in more than six-fold increase in the revenue that we collect from this. Small for now, it's under 200 million rand, but as we step this up, and this year we'll have a full year, we believe we estimated ultimately a revenue prejudice of about 3 billion rand, and we hope to approximate that value as we enforce this new regime. It's an example of administrative action that has a direct revenue result. Special focus also on high-risk industries, inexcisable production, such as fuel, alcohol, and tobacco, where blatant non-compliance is prevalent. We've had successful convictions across these high-risk industries with a potential prejudice of around 5 billion rand. But let me tell you, we are merely scratching the surface. There is so much more work to do in the area of customs crime, underdeclaration, trade mispricing, trade-based money laundering, to name a few. There are currently 105 cases on the NPA roll, 33 of which are on trial, while 72 of them pending an allocation of a trial date. To enforce the regulations, 27 importers and clearing agents were either suspended or cancelled through our licensing, registration and cancellation committee due to various non-compliance issues, and as I said, mostly linked to clothing, textile, footwear, tobacco and cigarettes and alcohol. But it's across the board. There was also a substantial increase in the efforts to remove illegal imports from circulation. The number of seizures has increased by 33%, and the value of seized goods has decreased by 12%, which compared to the end of March to almost 6 billion. And there's a fuller table available for those who have interest, like the media. In terms of syndicated tax and customs crime, here we are dealing with complex syndicated tax and customs crime, which require a greater degree of collaboration with local as well as international law enforcement agencies. And it requires effective enabling legislation for information exchange and for joint enforcement action. The tobacco and gold industry, illicit trade industry, is a typical example where we've seen success in the dismantling of a complex scheme through our investigative and prosecution work of these syndicate perpetrators. Just in this industry, 10 billion assessments have been raised and already 4.2 billion of cash recovered. Over the past 5 years, our syndicated tax and customs division, their efforts resulted in revenue recoveries totaling 66.7 billion, 24 of it being revenue collections, 1.3 billion in refund savings, and 40.5 billion in revenue leakage prevention. In the illicit trade in tobacco and gold, which is often used also for money laundering, in this year we have continued to collaborate with local and international enforcement authorities, and this has made significant inroads in both the gold and illicit industry, issuing assessments of a further 10 billion. Now, a contentious issue is still the use of daily monitoring of licensed tobacco manufacturers. We will continue to deploy this technology. Here we use smart technologies and closed-circuit TV installed at tobacco manufacturers, despite the significant resistance by some industry players.